Beverly Hills is no stranger to wealth, power, and secrets, but nothing could prepare the world for the brutal double murder that took place on August 20th, 1989. Inside a $5 million mansion, entertainment executive Jose Menendez and his wife Kitty were found shot to death, executed in their living room. The culprits? Not masked intruders or vengeful enemies, but their own sons, Lyle and Erik Menendez. But why would two wealthy, privileged boys, living the American dream, turn into shotgun-wielding killers? This is the question that stunned America and continues to divide public opinion to this day. Were Lyle and Erik cold-blooded killers who plotted their parents' deaths out of greed? Or were they emotionally shattered young men pushed to the edge by years of alleged sexual, physical, and psychological abuse? The murder scene, a picture of rage. The Menendez family home, located on Elm Drive in Beverly Hills, was the picture of upper-class perfection. But the crime scene was anything but. Jose was shot point-blank in the head with a 12-gauge shotgun while sitting on the couch. Kitty tried to flee but was chased down and shot repeatedly, at least 10 times. Her final injuries were described as overkill, her face nearly unrecognizable. The brutality of the crime shook investigators to their core. This wasn't a botched robbery. This was personal, violent, emotional, and calculated. The first lie, a break-in gone wrong? When Lyle, 21, and Erik, 18, called 911 that night, their voices were full of panic and horror. "Somebody killed my parents," Lyle screamed into the phone. Police arrived and initially treated the brothers as victims. Lyle and Erik claimed they had gone to the movies and returned to find their parents murdered. But their story quickly began to fall apart. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The sheer number of shotgun blasts seemed excessive, not opportunistic. Despite this, the brothers were allowed to stay in the mansion, attend their parents' funeral, and collect on their inheritance, all while under quiet suspicion, living large after the murders. In the months following the killings, Lyle and Erik spent nearly $1 million. They bought Rolex watches, luxury cars, and went on lavish shopping sprees. Lyle purchased a Porsche and a restaurant. Erik hired a personal tennis coach and jetted around the world. The spree raised red flags, but prosecutors still lacked one thing: a confession. That would soon change. The confession that cracked the case. Erik, burdened with guilt, eventually confessed to his therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel. But instead of maintaining doctor-patient confidentiality, Oziel told his mistress, who later went to the police after fearing for her life. The tapes of Erik's confession became the cornerstone of the case. However, a massive legal twist followed. The defense fought to suppress the tapes, citing doctor-patient privilege. After months of courtroom drama, the California Supreme Court ruled the tapes could be admitted, citing an exception for threats of future violence. The brothers were arrested in March 1990, 6 months after the murders. Abuse or greed? A legal and moral question. The motive, prosecutors said, was simple: greed. The Menendez brothers killed their parents to inherit millions. But the defense had a bombshell of its own. Lyle and Erik claimed they were victims of decades of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse by their father, and that their mother knew and did nothing to stop it. Their defense argued that the murders were not premeditated, but the result of years of trauma and fear boiling over into a deadly confrontation. They believed their father was going to kill them, the defense argued. Courtroom spectators were stunned. This wasn't just a case about murder, it was about family secrets, mental abuse, and the question of what drives someone to kill. Media frenzy, the first courtroom reality TV show. As the trial unfolded, it became a media circus. Televised daily, the Menendez case drew millions of viewers. People were captivated not just by the crime, but by the brothers' vulnerability on the stand. They cried. They hesitated. They described horrific stories of molestation, isolation, and control. Some viewers sympathized with the brothers, especially Erik, who appeared more fragile. Others believed it was a manipulation tactic. Were they telling the truth or acting their way out of a death sentence? Public opinion split sharply. The case became one of the first true crime TV dramas. years before Netflix made crime docs mainstream. The first trial ends, but no verdict. In 1994, after months of testimony and intense national attention, the jury could not agree on a verdict. Both brothers' trials ended in hung juries. Prosecutors decided to retry the case, this time with a major change. The second trial would not be televised, and much of the emotional abuse testimony would be restricted. The courtroom was packed. The Menendez brothers, Lyle and Erik, sat side by side, dressed in suits, their faces solemn. Across the country, millions tuned in. The trial wasn't just about a brutal double murder. It was about the inner workings of a family the world thought was picture-perfect. The charges and public curiosity. Lyle, 21, and Erik, 18, were both charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution argued the case was simple: greed. The boys wanted their parents dead to inherit their multimillion-dollar estate. The defense, however, painted a much darker picture. Before the trial even started, the media had already cast its vote. Many saw the brothers as entitled Beverly Hills brats. But their defense team had a shocking revelation that would change everything: the abuse defense. In a dramatic move, the brothers accused their father, Jose Menendez, of years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Their mother, Kitty, they said, was not just a passive bystander, but someone who enabled and ignored the horror happening under their roof. The courtroom gasped. For the first time, people began to wonder, were these young men murderers? Or were they trauma victims who snapped? Erik broke down on the stand, detailing years of abuse. He claimed his father molested him, controlled him, and humiliated him in private. Lyle said he had tried to protect Erik, and when they couldn't take it anymore, they planned the murders out of fear, not greed. Critics and supporters clashed in the media. Some saw the testimony as desperate lies. Others believed it explained everything. The media frenzy. The trial became one of the first major courtroom events televised wall-to-wall. Daytime shows aired testimonies, cross-examinations, and expert opinions. The Menendez case became cultural currency. People at home debated whether the brothers were victims or monsters. Their polished appearances and emotional testimonies made it even harder to decide. The defense's strategy was risky. By admitting to the killings, the brothers gave up any chance of arguing innocence. Their only hope lay in convincing the jury that the abuse they suffered was so extreme, so relentless, that it drove them to commit the unthinkable. A nation divided. As the trial dragged on, it split the country. Some couldn't imagine any justification for murdering your parents. Others felt heartbreak at the thought of 2 boys growing up in such a toxic, terrifying home. Abuse experts were called in. Psychologists explained battered child syndrome. Prosecutors pushed back, pointing to the shopping sprees the brothers went on after the murders, buying Rolexes, Porsches, and luxury condos. To some, it was proof of cold-blooded intent. To others, it was the behavior of young men who had never been allowed to live, and were now suddenly free. The verdict. After months of testimony, deliberation began. But the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision. A mistrial was declared. The nation was stunned. The judge announced a retrial. Now, the case wasn't just about guilt. It was about how trauma and justice intersect. Could abuse justify murder? Would a second jury see things differently? The world waited. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. The retrial of Lyle and Erik Menendez in 1995 was a stark contrast to the first. Gone were the TV cameras. Gone was the public courtroom theater. This time, the judge ruled. No live broadcasts, no media circus. Just evidence, facts, and 2 brothers once again fighting for their lives. But without the emotional power of live testimony to sway the public, the tone of the trial changed dramatically. A new strategy, a new tone. The prosecution returned with more focus and determination. They sharpened their narrative. The Menendez brothers weren't traumatized children. They were spoiled, manipulative adults who executed their parents for money. Cold, calculated, greedy. Prosecutor Pamela Bozanik told the jury, they shot their parents not in the heat of the moment, but with premeditated intent. They wanted the money, and they wanted it fast. The brothers' defense attorneys, Leslie Abramson and Barry Levin, stuck with the abuse story. But with cameras off, the emotional weight didn't hit the same. Erik and Lyle again took the stand. They talked about the molestation, the beatings, the threats. They described a childhood lived in fear. But to some jurors, it now sounded rehearsed. And one major difference? The judge restricted how much the defense could explore the abuse. He ruled it couldn't be used as a justification for murder, only to explain the brothers' state of mind, shifting public opinion. Without the media showing daily courtroom tears and trauma, the story outside the courtroom changed. Headlines grew colder. Public sympathy waned. The initial shock of the abuse claims had worn off. In its place, doubt. Why didn't they go to the police? Why did they go shopping after the murders? Why did they lie to friends for months? The defense argued that trauma messes with logic, that children abused from a young age don't react normally. Experts testified about learned helplessness and how prolonged abuse can warp decision-making. But the prosecution hammered the same questions over and over. If they were terrified, why didn't they run? Why murder? The brothers on the stand. Erik's testimony again brought tears. He recounted being raped by his father for years. He said his mother, Kitty, drank heavily and refused to protect him. "We were afraid all the time," he said. "It never stopped." Lyle described walking in on Jose assaulting Erik. "I knew then he'd never stop unless we stopped him," he testified. But this time, the jury wasn't swayed as easily. They saw two grown men, highly educated, well-groomed, and articulate. They were told to look past emotion and into motive. And the motive, prosecutors said, was money. Closing arguments and final stakes. The defense pleaded for understanding. "These are not monsters," Abramson said. "They are the product of monstrous abuse." The prosecution said abuse, real or not, does not excuse murder. "Even if you believe every word of their story," Bozanek said, "they had choices, and they chose to kill." As the closing arguments wrapped, the courtroom grew still. The brothers, once the stars of a media sensation, now looked like ordinary men staring down a life sentence. The jury began deliberations. This time, there was no mistrial, no undecided votes. The nation would finally get an answer. On March 20th, 1996, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury in the second Menendez trial delivered its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder for both Lyle and Erik Menendez. The courtroom fell silent. No cameras, no national reaction caught in real time. Just two brothers, stunned, hearing the words that would define the rest of their lives. The jury found no justification for the murders. The claims of abuse, they decided, did not outweigh the brutality of the act. The Menendez brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The impact of the verdict. Public reaction was split. Some felt justice was finally served. Two killers who gunned down their parents in cold blood got what they deserved. Others saw tragedy on all sides. Two young men, possibly shaped by years of abuse, failed by every adult around them, and then judged without mercy. What remained undeniable was this: the Menendez case had changed the way Americans viewed family, trauma, and justice. It wasn't just about murder. It was about how deep dysfunction can be hidden beneath wealth, reputation, and power, and what happens when it finally erupts. Life behind bars. Lyle and Erik were sent to separate prisons. No contact, no communication for over 20 years. Lyle was housed at Mule Creek State Prison, and Erik at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility. Both adapted to prison life in remarkably different ways. Lyle earned a degree in communications and mentored younger inmates. Erik became involved in rehabilitation programs and wrote letters to supporters. Both eventually got married to women on the outside, forming long-distance relationships through letters and monitored visits. Despite everything, they expressed remorse, not just for the murders but for how they handled everything afterward. In an interview, Lyle once said, "I would give anything to take it back. I was a broken person then. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it." The rise of renewed interest. the TikTok generation. In the 2010s and 2020s, something unexpected happened. The Menendez brothers became a viral sensation again, this time through TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube. Young people, many who weren't even born when the murders occurred, began revisiting the case. They watched courtroom clips, dissected testimony, and asked, were the brothers truly evil, or were they products of unimaginable abuse? Hashtags like #JusticeForMenendez trended. Psychologists weighed in. True crime YouTubers covered the story with modern trauma-informed perspectives. This renewed wave of attention raised complex questions. Did the justice system overlook signs of real abuse? Were the Menendez brothers ever truly safe enough to come forward before the murders? Can someone be both a victim and a perpetrator? Ongoing legal hopes. Despite multiple failed appeals, the Menendez brothers' legal team continues to push for a retrial, especially as California laws around abuse survivors evolve. New evidence has surfaced, including statements from cousins who claim they were told about the abuse decades earlier. In 2023, a motion for reconsideration was filed, citing new laws that allow more weight to be given to past trauma in criminal cases. As of now, the brothers remain incarcerated, still hoping for a chance to present their full story, perhaps with the kind of understanding the world lacked in 1996. Final thoughts. The Menendez brothers, cold-blooded killers or victims of abuse, remains one of the most mind-bending cases in American criminal history. It blurs the line between guilt and survival, between justice and vengeance. It forces us to ask, what would you do if your worst abuser was the person who gave you life? And more importantly, would anyone believe you? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell.